Sometimes saying just 3 words out loud is enough to change the rest of your life. Your 3 words might be, I love you. They might be, I'm leaving. For me, the 3 words are this: I am bisexual and I am polyamorous. To stand here on this stage and say those words might seem like no big deal. And in many ways, you're right, it's not. After all, I'm not really saying anything controversial. Being bisexual just means that I love people of all kinds, men or women or anyone in between. Being polyamorous means that I'm not monogamous. In other words, I think it's possible to have more than one loving relationship at the same time. I'm also single, so clearly that's working out for me. I'm very open about who I am with my friends and my colleagues, but I kept it a secret from my family for my entire life because I was scared they wouldn't accept me, and I didn't want to lose them. That all changed 1 month ago when I finally came out of the closet to my family. Some of my family members have been extremely loving and accepting. And others, unfortunately, had a very negative reaction. One member of my immediate family even told me that I could not go ahead with this talk because this is something disgusting. This is something that I shouldn't be proud of. I was threatened. I was blackmailed. I was even bribed. I had to think long and hard about whether to go ahead with this talk. It was a difficult decision. I really love my family, and I respect their opinions. But ultimately, it comes down to this. I am not going to hide, because I am not ashamed of who I am. Sadly, my story with my family is not unique. There are countless numbers of people who might be going through something similar right now. And of all the shocking words that were said, 3 words in particular stood out to me. 3 words that I have heard over and over and over. And those words are this: it's not natural. Those words are so often used as a weapon against people who are LGBT, or people who are polyamorous, or even women who don't fit into traditional gender roles. Those words are particularly interesting to me because first and foremost, I am a biologist. So I am fascinated by the study of what is and is not natural. I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes really breaking down this idea, trying to understand what it really means, and having a look at some of the amazing things that we do actually see in nature. So natural, by definition, means things that occur in nature, in the world of plants and animals. And I'm not suggesting that we are exactly the same as animals. We're obviously not. We do lots of things that are not natural. We drive cars, and we talk on phones, and we wear clothes. And technically, if you're going to argue it that way, straight marriage is not actually natural because you don't see animals getting married. Unless you've got an Etsy account and too much time on your hands. But you don't see anyone protesting at straight weddings on the basis that they're not natural, because that would be ridiculous. The idea that everything natural is good and unnatural is bad is something called the Gaia fallacy, and it's very easy to disprove, because cyanide is natural. That doesn't mean it's good for you. So clearly that argument falls apart, but it did actually get me wondering, do we see homosexuality and bisexuality in animals? And the answer is yes, we do. Homosexuality has been documented in more than 1,500 different species of animals, and in a third of those regularly. Everything from Asian elephants to African elephants, to lions, giraffes, dolphins, penguins, dragonflies, and every species of great ape, our closest ancestor. That's orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, and bonobos. In fact, in bonobos, the vast majority of individuals are bisexual, and 60% of mating behavior happens between two females. Homosexual animal couples also raise young. In New York Central Park Zoo, there are two penguins called Roy and Silo, two males who formed a romantic pair. And a zookeeper saw them trying to hatch a stone. He also had an egg left over from a heterosexual couple who were not nesting it. So he gave that egg to Roy and Silo. And they took turns nesting it, and they did a great job. And it hatched into a healthy female chick called Tango. And as it turns out, Tango grew up and also happened to be gay. Their story was written up into a children's book called Tango Makes Three. And it's used to teach children that love is what actually makes a family. So clearly, we do see homosexuality and bisexuality in animals. So what about things like trans or non-binary? What else is natural? Before we go any further, we have to understand the difference between gender and sex. So to do this, I'm going to use this illustration by Sam Killerman. It's called The Genderbread Person. Informative and delicious. This shows quite clearly the difference between your gender identity, that's who you are, your orientation, that's who you love or are attracted to, your sex, which is your physical body, and your gender expression, that's how you dress. Each of these things is a spectrum, not a binary. And by that, I mean it's all shades of gray. It's not black and white. It's easy for us to understand that gender expression is a spectrum because sometimes I wear trousers and sometimes I wear a skirt. Your orientation is also a spectrum. Just because I'm bi, it doesn't mean that I like men and women all the time equally in the same way for the same reasons. It's more complicated than that. And it can change over time as well. Your gender is also a spectrum. There are lots of people who will identify as 100% male or 100% female, but there are plenty of people who will identify with aspects of both gender, or neither, or maybe queer or gender fluid. But gender is a social construct. It doesn't exist in animals. So from now on, I'm only going to be talking about biological sex. Now, in humans, broadly speaking, our sex is determined by our chromosomes. So in biological males, they look like this, an X and a Y chromosome. In biological females, we have two X chromosomes. It's very important to remember that even at this fundamental level, there is variation. There are people who have extra sets of chromosomes, people who have different combinations, or people who are intersex, who have both sets of genitals. So even the thing that we may consider a binary simply is not. But broadly speaking, we can say that sex is determined by chromosomes in humans. So is this true of all animals? Let's have a think about the birds and the bees, starting with the birds. Birds do have sex chromosomes, but males have two the same, and females have two different, the opposite of humans. So already we can see that our human model is not the norm. In bees, it is radically different. There are three types of bee. There's a queen, who is a female. There's a worker, who is also a female. And then there's a drone. Those are the males. So when you see a colony of bees working away, those are all females. The males don't do any work. I'm not making any kind of social commentary here, please. I'm only talking about bees. So the males are only born in order to have sex, and then they die. It's a short life. And a queen mates once in her life, and then she stores the sperm. And that means that she can control very precisely whether she's laying a male or a female. Because if she fertilizes the egg, then it becomes a female. And if she doesn't, then it becomes a male. It also means that male bees have no father, which is a very strange fact to try and wrap your head around. You can see why studying the animal world really forces us to question our most fundamental assumptions about sex and about reproduction. Another assumption that people often have is that male animals have a penis and female animals don't. And that's not even true in humans. But it's also not true in animals. This is a female spotted hyena. You can hear some giggling at the front. Brace yourselves. The female has genitals, which are called a pseudopenis. It's actually a modified clitoris, and it looks just like the male genitalia, except it's larger. She also gives birth through it, which is quite an achievement. Both males and females can have erections, and that is actually a sign of surrender or submission. So that's an interesting take on a behavior that we, in our human ignorance, might tend to associate with dominance. Now, so far, the animals we've talked about have permanent sexes, by which I mean they're either male or female, and that doesn't change over time. But in many animals, sex is more fluid, and it does change. That's what we call a sequential hermaphrodite. One example is a clownfish. In a school of clownfish, there's usually only one female. She's the biggest fish, and she's the top rank in the hierarchy, so she is very important. And if she dies, then the next biggest fish, which is a male, turns into a female to replace her. It would have made the movie Finding Nemo entirely different. There are even animals which are both sexes at the same time. My favorite example is the banana slug. Its Latin name is Dolichophallus, which means enormous penis in Latin. So you know what they're famous for. And actually, it comes out of their forehead like some kind of pornographic unicorn. I love biology. Now, all of them have both sets of genitals, male and female, so when they want to mate, they form a beautiful yellow yin-yang, like this, and each inserts its male organ into the female organ of the other. But it's so large that quite often it will get stuck. And when that happens, they have to work together to chew it off. I don't want to alarm you, but sea slugs take it a step further. Their genitals are sharp like a spear, and they stab it into the side of the other individual in a process called traumatic insemination. And yes, it is traumatic. This harms the receiver, but it benefits the giver because it means that the other individual has to carry the young. In flatworms, which you can see here, this has evolved into a competitive behavior which is known as penis fencing. The animal world is obviously incredibly diverse. We see a whole lot of different behaviors. In some animals, they've dispensed with the battle of the sexes entirely, and there's only one sex. This is a desert grassland whiptail lizard, an animal in which there are only females. There are never any males. They lay eggs which are unfertilized, and those hatch into their daughters, more females, in a process called parthenogenesis. But what's really interesting is they don't lay eggs all the time. They only do it when they've been mounted or climbed on top of by another female. There are even animals in which there are more than two sexes. This is a creature called Tetrahymena thermophylla. It's a single-cell animal, and it has 7 different mating types, which functionally are exactly like sexes. Now, that may seem really shocking and bizarre, but there are animals which go even further, or organisms, I should say, which go even further. This is a fungus called Schizophilum commune, and it has not 7 different mating types, but 28,000. So if you were a Schizophilum commune fungus on Tinder, you would have a real bad time. The world of nature is diverse and eye-opening and amazing. Clearly, biology cannot be used to justify bigotry. In fact, I would say the opposite is true. The more we look and study the natural world, the more we are forced to question our own most fundamental assumptions. If you remember only 3 words from my talk, let it be as follows. This, all of this is natural. Thank you very much. As a science communicator, I know that we took in a lot of information just then. And I like to summarize my talks in ways that are short and memorable and funny. So I'd like to summarize what we've just learned in the form of a rap. I'm a scientist, a rapper, and a biologist, and I know that that's ridiculous, but I know you can follow this, because bigotry is bull when you've got the facts. When someone says unnatural, send this track. To recklessly heckle me on my subject of specialty is a foolish move. You should be careful, especially with the words you choose, because if this girl is loose, not averse to using science in defiance of your views, so let's break it down. What is natural? It's what actually happens in non-human animals, so cannibals, well, that happens in nature, doesn't mean that it's desirable behavior. So clearly there's no basis for this sexist little thesis, but I'd like to break it down and then we'll pick up the pieces, because I want to pick apart the many ways in which it's wrong. Sit back and relax, this shouldn't take long. Now remember, we're not talking about gender, just sex. Gender is a spectrum, it's more complex. When you think of sex, it's more between your legs, it's more your sperm and eggs, your X, Y, and XX. But check the text, you find there's extra sets, so don't forget the rest, there's also intersex. So never go assuming that it's simple in humans. In animals, it's even more confusing. So let's talk about the birds and the bees, because the word on the street is that these are my real expertise. They're the bee's knees, and the colonies are all female. And when the queen needs a couple free males, she lays unfertilized eggs. That means male bees never have a father. They're only born to have sex with the new queens, then they die living lives like a martyr. They're non-starters. This is just the start, because when you look at what a sex is, it falls apart. To say what a sex is, it can be hard, because there's plenty of animals where they have both parts, like banana slugs. Their method is madness, hard to love because they've got dolichophallus. Both have a penis like a really weird porn, it's on their head like some kind of phallic unicorn, and that's natural. I love that shit. I'm really adding filler here because I love that bit, but my point is that nature is full of diversity and they don't teach you that at university. You think there's 2 sexes? I used to believe you. I found an organism called Tetrahymena. It's a single-celled animal with 7 different sexes, perplexing. But if that wrecks your mind, check this. 7 at best may have left you astounded. Here's another creature that has 28,000. That's right, the schizophilum fungus. Its orgies must be humongous. Back to mammals, because we act like animals. We think we're rational when in fact we're fallible. Here's a radical fact. Your sexual member doesn't have to match your sex or your gender. For example, some ladies may have a penis. That can be true in humans, but also hyenas. They have a pseudopenis, that's a modified clitoris, and they give birth through it. Maybe a little bit of a masochist. Can you imagine this? Another fun fact about the matter is, when either sex is submitting, they erect their member like a little white flag of surrender. Biology is wild, mad, diverse. I think there's only one thing left to say in this verse. Let's check your audience and what their knowledge is, and never pick on a bisexual biologist. Thank you.